Hare Krishna. We welcome all of you to discussions on Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 2. Today we will be beginning with the answers to the 6 questions that the sages in Naimisharanya have asked. I hope all of you have revised the first 6 questions given in the first chapter. So these questions are very relevant and very practical for modern times. And Sutta Goswami is now going to begin answering these questions in chapter 2. So today we are going to start with chapter 2. And now we will begin with the first 5 verses of chapter 2, which is like not the answers to the questions, but before answering the questions, the speaker of Bhagavatam, Sutta Goswami, offers obeisances. He offers respects. So he's setting the mood the speaker should have before he attempts to answer the questions. So it is very interesting. Let us see the mood of the speaker of Bhagavatam, and that teaches us how we should also have a similar mood as we study Srimad Bhagavatam. So this mood will help us internalize the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. So what is the mood that Sutta Goswami is revealing, which will be very important for all of us to imbibe as we study the sacred scripture? So let us begin with the first verse of the chapter 2. So today, who is going to read the translations as we read the verses? And in between, you may have to read the purports also. Some purports. Who would volunteer today? Okay. Thank you, Mataji. So you can, Mita Mataji can read so now we'll chant the first verse. You can please repeat after me. Is it possible to put this verse on the screen? Is it okay? Chapter 2, text number 1. Vyasa uvacha iti samsprishna samrishto vipranam maharshani prati puja vachastesham pravaktum upachakrame.
Ugrashrava Sutta Goswami, the son of Romaharshana, being fully satisfied by the perfect questions of the Brahmanas, thanked them and thus attempted to reply.
So Sutta Goswami heard the questions. Now 2 things he is doing. He is fully satisfied with the questions. And now secondly, he is thanking them. Oh, thank you for giving me opportunity to speak Bhagavatam. Thank you for this question. I'm fully satisfied by your questions. And now he's going to speak. So these are the first words of Sutta Goswami. He is going to speak Srimad Bhagavatam. Let us see what is his mood. This is revealed from text 2 onwards. So we'll now chant text 2. Sutta Vacha Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam dvaipayano virahakataramajuhava putreti tanmayataya tarabobhinedus tam sarvabhutardayam munimanatosmi.
Srila Sutta Goswami said, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto that great sage, Sukadeva Goswami, who can enter the hearts of all. When he went away to take up the renounced order of life, that is sannyasa, leaving home without undergoing reformation by the sacred thread or the ceremonies observed by the higher castes, his father, Vyasadeva, fearing separation from him, cried out, 'O my son, indeed only the trees which are absorbed in the same feelings of separation echoed in response to the begrieved father.'"
So now, these are the first words spoken by the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam, Sutta Goswami. This is interesting because here we see that the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam, Sutta Goswami, is glorifying his spiritual master the original teacher of Srimad Bhagavatam, from whom he has heard Srimad Bhagavatam, and that is Sukadeva Goswami. So the speaker begins by glorifying his teacher or remembering with gratitude his spiritual master. So what is happening here is the speaker is beginning by glorifying his teacher. For the first etiquette, basic etiquette of studying Bhagavatam is to remember with gratitude our spiritual master. Now, he's saying that, he's praying that let Sukadeva Goswami enter my heart and let him reveal to me what I have to share with all of you. So we also, when we study Bhagavatam, we are praying that let Sukadeva Goswami, the original speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam, let him enter my heart. Then when I speak or study Bhagavatam, my heart would get transformed. And then when my heart is transformed, and then when I share this message with others, it will touch their heart as well. Otherwise, the knowledge will go to my head, and it will go, when I speak it, it will go to somebody else's, other person's head. Bhagavatam is not for information, it is for transformation. And transformation happens in the heart, not in the head. So therefore, Bhagavatam is not for simply accumulating knowledge. It is for obtaining realization. So the fundamental premise of studying Bhagavatam is remembering Guru, remembering Sri Guru with gratitude. And in that mood, we study Bhagavatam knowing fully well that the Guru has to reveal the subject matter in my heart, because on my own, I cannot fathom this subject. This is not like a material subject where you rack your brains and then you get the understanding. Here, see, in outside world, in material subject matters, we achieve success. We achieve understanding. Here we don't achieve, here we receive. There is a difference between achieve and receive. Bhakti is all about receiving grace. Therefore, Dhruva, in the 4th canto, we find this beautiful verse. Dhruva Maharaj is he has done intense penance, and Lord Vishnu has appeared before him. Now, Dhruva Maharaj has an opportunity to ask what he wants from the Lord. So the Lord has appeared before him, and young, the little small Dhruva, he's so excited. He wants to ask benedictions, but he doesn't forget the first important step. He says, my dear Lord, actually, I am lifeless. I can't do anything on my own. You have to enter my heart first. Yonta pravishya mama vachamimam prasuptan sanjivayat akhila shakti dhara swadhamna anyamscha hasta charana shravana tvagadi prana namo bhagavate purushaya tubhyam. This is the first verse Dhruva speaks when the Supreme Lord appears before him. He says, my dear Lord, I will ask for benedictions, definitely. That's what he had done penance for. But when the Lord appears, he says, I will ask later, but first you enter my heart and give me the intelligence to ask properly. Yonta pravishya, you enter me. Mama vacham, then enter my mouth so that I can speak properly. Imam prasuptan sanjivayat akhila shakti. The entire energy of this cosmos, the spiritual potency which you possess, akhila shakti dharasva dhamna, let that enter me. Let my ears, eyes, senses, nose, let all my bodily organs and senses and mind be enlivened by your entry. Anyam shahasta charana shravana tvagadin prana namo bhagavate purushaya tubhyam. Oh, my dear Lord, I offer my respects to you. So the whole idea is that we are not sure of our own abilities, in the sense the world teaches us, we are in control, we have to be strong, you can get what you want. There's a book I saw, get what you want, I can win. That's great for success in material life. We need that consciousness. But in spiritual growth, this kind of mood is very unfavorable. In spiritual path, it's not about how I can figure out something. It's all about receiving grace. It's about I want to be open-minded and I want to allow the Lord to enter my heart. Even in this world, we can't always be in control. Like when I was a young boy, I was very much interested in sports and I would watch a lot of sports things. And one of the greatest icons in sports at that time, of course, he had retired by then. His name was Muhammad Ali. Cassius Clay was a boxer. And he had won the gold medal in Rome 1960 Olympics. And he had thrown away the gold medal in the Ohio River because of racial prejudice. And then he went on to become a heavyweight boxer. And he was so strong that when he would enter the boxing ring to fight, his fans would sing a song. I fly like a bird. I sting like a bee. I am the greatest, Muhammad Ali. And he would go on knock off his opponents, He had such strong arms that he would bash up people. But the same Muhammad Ali, and he said, I am the greatest. That was his famous punchline. I am the greatest. But over a period of time, when he got Parkinson's and, the material nature knocked him so badly that in 1996 Atlanta Olympics, he was the final carrier of the torch of flame. And his hands were trembling. He barely managed to put it on that big torch, and then everyone applauded. But the organizers simply heaved a sigh of relief because it would have been a major embarrassment had he faltered. But that's the reality. In 36 years, material nature took away all the power from his hands. And this will happen to us as well. He was so strong. His hands were so powerful that he would knock off one adversary after another. But material nature told him, like we had this famous movie, where in Sholay, that was it's an iconic movie. So I remember the dialogue of that movie. Material energy telling Muhammad Ali, ye haath mujhe de de, Muhammad Ali. This hand, material energy takes it away. However strong you are, whatever power you have, it all goes down. So, and this is universal. Anytime anything can go wrong. Therefore, a student of Bhagavatam is always aware that I am helpless. My intelligence, my words, my senses, they can be enlivened by Krishna and Guru's mercy. Guru enters my heart, then I can speak. There are so many examples. Also, I remember, when I was young, there was a very famous tennis player, Steffi Graf. She was #1 in the world. And then a young girl came up, Monica Sales. And before she was 19, she had won 10 Grand Slam tournaments and she was destined to be the greatest tennis player ever. But in one tournament, as she was switching the side after the break and she was taking those break, there was one Steffi Graf fan who was so outraged that this young girl is toppling over his star, Steffi Graf, that he got so envious that he brought a knife. You can later on watch it on YouTube. There are videos. He actually stabbed her from behind. And then she fell off the chair. It's all there on camera. And then she was so shocked. She was in the hospital. She recovered. And then she was shocked more because that criminal, that man, was pardoned by the German court and he was allowed to go scot-free later on. And she was shocked that she had been badly injured and she didn't get justice. It emotionally caused her so much pain that she stopped playing tennis. She went on binge eating. She put on 40 kgs. She was destined to become the greatest tennis player ever, but then she couldn't play tennis. Her career was over when she was just 20 years old. Overnight, our lives can just go bonkers. Life is so topsy-turvy. Anything can go wrong. One of the greatest tennis legends was Bjorn Borg. He was called as Mr. Cool. He won 5 Grand Slam tournaments, one after another, Wimbledon. He was such a great champion. And a few years ago, I was shocked when I came to know that he has gone bankrupt and he's in depression. So these are all realities. These are realities. And for us to understand how terrible material world is and how we need to take shelter of Krishna, we need the mercy of Guru and Krishna to enter our hearts. And we know our vulnerable position. We know how fallible we are. So we enter Bhagavatam in that mood. We don't read Bhagavatam for entertainment. This is a very important point. Bhagavatam is not for entertainment, it's for enlightenment. No, it's not like, we have different sources for entertainment. So we think, okay, I'm doing all of these things, but I need some pious entertainment. So let me read Bhagavatam. So Bhagavatam is not some pious entertainment. It is serious stuff. As you will read future chapters, you will read strong statements about material world, material sense gratification. They're very strong. It's not for the weak-hearted, but we have to have that humility that, oh, my dear Lord, my dear Guru, please enter my heart. And there has to be a desperation to understand Bhagavatam. Once one man went to a Guru and said, I want to understand spiritual knowledge, please teach me. The Guru said, I have no time for you, please come later. So this man kept coming. So the Guru said, are you really desperate to study Bhagavatam? He said, yes. How desperate are you? But I'm really desperate. And the Guru was a well-built, strong man. He had strong arms. So he told this prospective student that, why don't you come with me to the river? He took him to the middle of the river and he told him, why don't you take a dip in? So as he took dip inside the water and his head was under the water, the Guru held his head and put it down. And this man was under the water, was gasping for breath. And just when he thought he'll die, the Guru pulled him out. And he just got a little bit of air and he felt so relieved. And the Guru asked him, how desperate were you for air when I ducked you inside? And this man finally somehow managed to hold himself and he said, I was so desperate. I could do anything. I just needed a little bit of air for survival. So the Guru said, when you are that desperate for God, then you come to me. You can't understand otherwise Srimad Bhagavatam if you are simply approaching it superficially. So he is saying, Suta Goswami is beginning Srimad Bhagavatam with this understanding that, I take shelter of my Guru, Shukdev Goswami. I beg him to enter my heart, reveal the spiritual knowledge, and then he wants to glorify. And now he is going to glorify Shukdev Goswami in very beautiful poetry in text number 3. So we can chant the 3rd verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd chapter. So please repeat after me. Yaha swanubhavam akila shruti saramekam adhyatma deepam atititir shatam tamondham samsarinam karunayaha purana guhyam tam vyasa sunamupayami guru munina.
Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him, Shuka, the spiritual master of all sages, the son of Vyasadeva, who, out of his great compassion for those gross materialists who struggle to cross over the darkest regions of material existence, spoke this most confidential supplement to the cream of Vedic knowledge, after having personally assimilated it by experience.
So Suta Goswami has first prayed that he wants Guru and Krishna to enter his heart. And now he's specifically glorifying Shukdev Goswami and revealing what is his speciality. His speciality is that he can help us cross over the ocean of material existence. Adhyatma Deepam, we have the torchlight of knowledge. So just like when there is darkness and you switch on the light, all the darkness goes away. Similarly, the heart is filled with tamoguna, ignorance, which is compared to darkness. Ignorance is often compared with darkness. So when we get spiritual knowledge, it is like a torchlight. Just like when you have a light, the darkness goes away. Similarly, when there is spiritual knowledge, ignorance goes away. So Shukdev Goswami's speciality is that he can remove the darkness of the heart or the ignorance of the heart with the light of Srimad Bhagavatam. That's why we know how did I begin the class today? If you observed, I chanted one prayer. I said, Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya. I chanted this. Ajnana-timirandasya. I have got cataract of ignorance. So Guru is like the cataract surgeon who will remove the cataract like ignorance with his knowledge like scissors. And he will reveal to us what is reality. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya. Chakshu. Chakshu means eyes. My eyes have got the cataract of ignorance. Chakshurun militam ena tasmai Shri Guruve namaha. So I offer my respects to Guru because the Guru, he even if you have the most beautiful eyes, but if there is darkness all around, you can't see anything. So you need external light, right? And if there is light, but if you are blind, then you can't see. So we need somebody to give us the eyes. So Guru is that person. And even those who are good eye surgeons, when they need eye surgery, they go to another eye surgeon. The best dentist will go to another dentist when he needs a dental work. So Guru is necessary. You will see in every field there is a Guru. Even when you want to learn Bharatanatyam, you'll go to a Guru. There are corporate gurus. Even a small, rustic, gross, rough and tough truck drivers. Have you seen them train their cottages? Have you seen them train their young boys who come to serve them, who come to become truck drivers? They start getting chai for them, they start massaging them. And after a few months, that fellow allows the young boy to touch the wheel of the truck. And then slowly, by doing humble, menial service, he then one day becomes a truck driver, and then he starts driving his own trucks. Everywhere, even in kitchen when we go, the head cook will first make us cut the sabzis, he'll make us clean the pots, and then when he's pleased with us, he'll tell us, okay, now you can light the stove. That's how we start entering the kitchen in our temple. Nowhere we directly get everything. Our attitude is tested. That and Guru is needed. Of course, it's nowadays fashionable also, but actually there is more than that. The knowledge is revealed by sincerely wanting to study and knowing that I need somebody to guide me and help me. And Srila Prabhupada writes such a powerful purport. And I want Mataji, can you read the second paragraph? I want all of you to hear very attentively. This is extremely powerful. The second paragraph of the purport. I'll tell you when to stop. But each sentence of this purport is beautiful. Can you please read?
Yes, Prabhuji. From there is no point.
Yeah.
Okay. There is no point in arguing that a materialistic man can be happy. No materialistic creature, be he the great Brahma or an insignificant ant, can be happy. Everyone tries to make a permanent plan for happiness. But everyone is baffled by the laws of material nature. Therefore, the materialistic world is called the darkest region of God's creation. Yet, the unhappy materialists can get out of it simply by desiring to get out. Unfortunately, they are so foolish that they do not want to escape. Therefore, they are compared to the camel who relishes thorny twigs because he likes the taste of the twigs mixed with blood. He does not realize that it is his own blood that his tongue is being cut by the thorns. Similarly, to the materialist, his own blood is as sweet as honey, and although he is always harassed by his own material creations, he does not wish to escape. Such materialists are called karmis. Out of hundreds of thousands of karmis, only a few may feel tired of material engagement and desire to get out of the labyrinth. Such intelligent persons are called jnanis. The Vedanta Sutra is directed to such jnanis. But Srila Vyasadeva, being the incarnation of the Supreme Lord, could foresee the misuse of the Vedanta Sutra by unscrupulous men, and Therefore, he personally supplemented the Vedanta Sutra with the Bhagavata Purana. It is clearly said that this Bhagavatam is the original commentary on the Brahma Sutras. Srila Vyasadeva also instructed the Bhagavatam to his own son, Srila Sukadeva Goswami, who was already at the liberated stage of transcendency. Srila Sukadeva realized it personally and then explained it. By the mercy of Srila Sukadeva, the Bhagavad Vedanta Sutra is available for all those sincere souls who want to get out of material existence.
Yes, thank you. This is a long paragraph, but this gives us the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada has given us in this one paragraph the main message of Srimad Bhagavatam. That is, this material world is a place of misery and suffering, and an intelligent person, a spiritual seeker, will seek permanent solution. He will want to align his life to certain spiritual principles so that his suffering in this world is for the last time. And he can go back home to his spiritual abode. So that's what Srila Prabhupada is writing here. He's writing that there is no point in arguing that we cannot be happy. I mean, it's people have to, we can be happy, sorry. There's no point in arguing about that because we can't be happy in this world. And you know, what happens when we are younger, I've seen that we don't like this idea and we challenge it. But as we get older, I've seen when I used to do college preaching 25 years ago, young boys would challenge this and we used to give them a lot of stories, analogies and jokes, and then they would get convinced and they would enjoy it. And even if they were not convinced, then we had this plate of sumptuous prasadam and they would be satisfied with prasadam. But to convince young boys and girls that this material world is a place of suffering is very difficult. But when I entered congregation preaching 10 years ago and I started doing programs in Borivali, I was pleasantly surprised that when I would speak on suffering and all of them would nod their head. I was like, wow, it is so easy. I realized congregation preaching is very easy because people relate to the subject matter of Srimad Bhagavatam. I remember in 2018, I had an opportunity to be in Western Australia. So one of my friends organized, they have this business, I forget the Western Australia business group or something. So they meet every Saturday in a club and all the business leaders. So my friend was one of the members. So he arranged my program there. So none of them are Hare Krishnas. So I was supposed to give them a 20-minute talk, and then they would then they had their own agendas, you know, business meeting and all of that. So then I thought, why I should beat around the bush and why I should just simply flatter them and tell them sweet and goody things. Why not speak like what Srila Prabhupada spoke? Why not speak the message of Srimad Bhagavatam? And they may get bewildered, but that's okay. You know, I don't have to worry. Because generally, when we go do programs, we speak milder stuff because we don't want people to feel shocked by the statements of Bhagavatam. We think, oh, they'll feel scared. They may not chant Hare Krishna, or they may not invite us again for the program. I was thinking, but I don't care. You know, these guys I'm not going to come to them again. So might as well give them the pure, unadulterated, concentrated stuff, Shuddha Ghee Ka Mal. So I began by saying, this world is a place of suffering. And I spoke exactly like what Srimad Bhagavatam speaks about this material world. And then after my talk, and I could see people are nodding their head, they're understanding. And after that, there are the agendas. And then at the end of the meeting, everybody had to speak for 1 minute. And all of them spoke about my class. And all of them said, you were bang on. This world is so bad. And everyone agreed with what I was speaking. And I was so happy and glad that I spoke that. I didn't hesitate. And the best part was one young man, Trevor, Australian, I will never forget him. He spoke so eloquently. He said, what you spoke in those 20 minutes, it just lit up everything in my heart because a few years ago when the stock markets crashed, I lost a lot of money and I was devastated. But last year I made 4 times more money and I covered all the losses and I made a lot of money. But I compared the pain that I went through when I lost money was 4 or 5 times much higher in intensity than the happiness I experienced when I got my money back. He was saying how pain is more prominent in this world than pleasure. So like this, each one of them shared their realizations, and I came back after that program much wiser. So the point I'm saying is this world is Dukkhalayam, and Srimad Bhagavatam doesn't flatter. Srimad Bhagavatam is not for those who want painkillers for relief. Srimad Bhagavatam will give us a very good medicine. Of course, we need, don't get me wrong, we need painkillers. Sometimes people are distressed, and they have their own sources of painkillers for instant relief from pain and sadness. That's okay. But please don't mistake the painkillers for real medicine. Because Bhagavatam says, even this verse says, Bhagavatam repeatedly compares this world to an ocean. And you will see Bhagavatam amazing, every now and then you will see an ocean analogy given to explain how we are suffering. Like imagine you are in the middle of an ocean, and even if you're a great swimmer, would you be happy swimming in the middle of an ocean? Samsara sindhu mati dustaramutti tirsho nanyapplavo bhagavata purushottamasya Leela katharasa nishevanam pumso bhavet vivida dukkha davarditasya. Srimad Bhagavatam says that this samsara is Sindhu. Sindhu means ocean. Samsara Sindhu ati dustaram. It's very difficult to cross over this ocean by swimming. Samsara Sindhu ati dustaram utti tirshor. But somebody may have a desire to cross over this ocean. So Suta Goswami is saying that if you have a strong desire to cross over this ocean, don't think by your swimming you can get over. You need a strong boat. What is that boat? Nanyapplavo bhagavata purushottamasya. The strongest boat is Bhagavatam and glorification of Krishna. That is the strongest boat. So you may say, well, but what exactly do you mean by Krishna, the boat in which we can cross over this ocean of material existence? What exactly does it mean practically? It means Leela Katha Rasanishe Vanamantarena, hearing and chanting the glories of Krishna and rendering Nishevana means rendering service. So if we have two things in our life, service attitude, and a culture of hearing and chanting. So if we have these two things in our lives, these two activities are compared to a strong boat that will help us cross over the ocean. Now let us say, I don't want this boat of Krishna consciousness. I don't want this boat of service, hearing, chanting. I would rather swim alone. Just imagine somebody in the middle of an ocean and is swimming against the waves. And he's an expert swimmer. What a terrible misfortune he will be in. And he's refusing the boat of Krishna Katha and Seva. So what will happen to him? The last line of this verse says, Pumso bhavet vivida dukkha davaditasya. A human being, if he rejects this amazing boat of service and hearing and chanting about Krishna, is only going to experience a variety of pleasure, a variety of misery, which is like davarditasya. Dava means fire. It's going to burn him. See, now the verse began with the analogy of an ocean, and it ends with the analogy of a forest fire. So the verse says that if we don't take shelter of Krishna's boat, then this ocean becomes fiery. He says that we will be burning in this ocean of material existence. I mean, generally it's a paradox. Ocean is filled with water and a forest can catch fire. But here he's saying that this ocean of material existence would burn the person with the fire of miseries. Every day morning at 5 o'clock when we get up, we get up at 4:30, we go to the, 5 o'clock we have the Mangalarati where we chant. So the first line of the Mangalarati prayers is Samsara Dava Nalanida Loka. This world is a blazing forest fire. Imagine early morning, we are standing in front of the Lord and saying that this world is a blazing forest fire, my dear Lord. And the Guru's instructions are like the cooling shower that gives us relief from this blazing fire. So Suta Goswami is saying that if we don't take shelter of Krishna, this world will burn us. But the interesting thing is the fire of this material existence is not rapid and not immediate. If it's a blazing fire, we'll immediately get burned. But this fire burns us slowly. It's like it gives us so much misery that we get roasted and we don't even realize we have been roasted alive. It's like, it's like you have a big cauldron of water and you put a frog inside. And if the water is boiling water, and if a frog is put inside, the frog will jump off. But if the water is normal temperature and the frog is inside and is enjoying, and slowly increase the temperature below. So if you slowly increase the temperature, the frog wouldn't jump out. The frog would remain in the water, not realizing that he's slowly getting burned and roasted. That's what happens to us. If it was too much of suffering, we would get out of this material world immediately. But material energy is so clever, she's so expert, that she gives us a little bit of suffering and slowly she burns us, so that by the time we realize I need to get out of this world, I'm like totally roasted and totally trapped by this forest fire of material existence. So that's how material world is. Therefore, our Vaishnava Acharyas have warned us, they have told us, don't make this world a permanent place. Srimad Bhagavatam is appealing to us. Do your duties, take care of your responsibilities, but in your heart, know that you have to get out. That is spiritual life. Spiritual life means to understand there is a bigger reality than me, my world, my mind. There is something higher. And unfortunately, we are unable to access this because we rely too much on our intelligence and on our abilities. Abilities means karma, action, and intelligence means jnana. Jnana and karma is what we focus on a lot to solve our material anxieties. But Srimad Bhagavatam is going to give us a new paradigm, that instead of jnana and karma, try bhakti, try the heart, offer your feelings, heart to Krishna, and see the difference it makes. Like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of our greatest acharyas, has sung a beautiful song. So in one of the stanzas, he says, Jnana karma thaga dui more pratariya loi avasheshe phele sindhu jale avasheshe phele sindhu jale. He says Jnana and karma are two thugs, dacoits. Jnana karma thagadui more pratariya lohi. They drag me, the two dacoits catch you from two sides and they throw you into the ocean. Avasheshe phele sindhu jale. They drown me in this ocean of suffering. So I'm drowning because I'm only controlled by jnana and karma. So now I want to give up this jnana and karma. These dacoits are extremely bad. So he's saying, at this time, my dear Lord, you are my friend. He no samaye bandhu, tumi Krishna kripa sindhu, kripa koro loho more bale, kripa koro loho more bale. He's saying, Hey, no, Samay Bandhu, at this time, my dear Bandhu is, my best friend is, to me, Krishna Kripa Sindhu. Krishna, you are my best friend. You are Kripa Sindhu. You are ocean of mercy. See, look at the contrast. I am suffering in an ocean of material existence, and Krishna is ocean of mercy. So he's saying, Kripa Koro Loho More Bale. Pick me up from this ocean of suffering and place me in the ocean of mercy. Let me make this change. Let me get out of this. And this is the prayer of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So we have to meditate on this ocean. Ocean is an amazing analogy to meditate upon. You will find everywhere in the Bhagavatam, there are hundreds of verses, which only speak about ocean. And if we have Chowpatty Beach here, we are lucky, we can go for a walk, we can see the ocean. And it's amazing when you see the ocean and you see how insignificant we are. I remember once I was with a friend in Perth, and we were at the shore. I asked him, if we go straight here, if we just start swimming from this point straight, where will we reach? So he had his Google map or whatever. He did all those things, and he told me, if we start swimming straight, we will reach Johannesburg, South Africa. I said, wow. And then he calculated the distance in kilometers, and we calculated. And then we realized it's like almost 3 times the distance of the size of India, the journey. That means you imagine Srinagar to Kanyakumari, it must be thousands of miles, right? So Srinagar to Kanyakumari 3 times. I mean, just imagine the distance we're talking about. And imagine somebody in the middle of the ocean there. How much time and energy it will take for him to swim. And that Malaysian Airlines disappeared a few years ago. I mean, nobody has discovered it. Where it fell in the ocean, what happened? I mean, it's crazy how insignificant we are and how vast and gigantic this tiny planet Earth is. And imagine this universe. So we are in an utterly vulnerable situation, and Srimad Bhagavatam is appealing to us, take shelter of Krishna. And Shukdev Goswami is the best personality to teach us Srimad Bhagavatam, because his heart was captured by Krishna. And not only that, see, there are 2 things that attracted Shukdev Goswami to Krishna. One was Krishna's beauty, but there was something else also. See, Shukdev Goswami, now I'll give a small background. Shukdev Goswami remained in his mother's womb for 16 years. He didn't come out because he was scared of this material world. And then when he came out, he was already self-realized, and he began walking away from home. He took renunciation. So his father wanted to stop him and teach him Bhagavatam. So his father, Vyasdev, sent some of his disciples ahead, and he told them to chant these 2 verses from Srimad Bhagavatam. When my son Shukdev Goswami hears these 2 verses, he's going to stop. And both verses describe Krishna's qualities. So Shukdev Goswami heard both the verses. His heart was captured by Krishna. And that's why he's the best teacher of Bhagavatam. And what are these 2 verses? First, what the disciples of Vyasdev did, they glorified Krishna's beauty. So the verse they chanted was, Baraha Pidam Natavara Vapu Karnayo Karnikaran Vibradavasa Kanaka Kapisam Vaijayanti Chamala Randran Venuradara Sudaya Parayan Gopa Vrinde Vrindaranyam Swapadaramanam Pravishad Gita Kirti. So the first verse they spoke about how Krishna has a beautiful peacock feather on his head. Baraha Pidam Natavara Vapu. He's standing like an expert dancer, actor. Karnayo Karnikaran. He has beautiful lily flowers tucked on his ears. Vibrada Vasaha Kanaka Kapisam. Krishna is wearing dazzling yellow, lightning colored dress. Vaijayanti Chamala. He has Vaijayanti garland on his body. Randran Venur Adhara Sudaya Parayan Gopa Vrinde. And he has a flute on his lips. Now, look at the poetic composition. Instead of saying Krishna is playing the flute, the verse says, Randran Venur Adhara Sudaya Parayan Gopa Vrinde. Krishna is pouring the nectar of his lips into the holes of the flute. Instead of saying he's playing the flute, so poetically, your poetic imagination is enlivened. So Shukdev Goswami is hearing all this. And then what? Vrindaranyam Sapadaramanam Pravishad Gitaki. And Krishna is entering Vrindavan with his friends, playing the flute with lily flowers stuck on his ear, a dazzling Vaijayanti Mala with a beautiful yellow colored dress and peacock feather. So the description when Shukdev Goswami hears, his heart is captured by Krishna's beauty. But that attraction becomes complete because the second verse reveals Krishna's another quality, which Shukdev Goswami also imbibes. And that's why he is the best teacher of Bhagavatam. And when we read Bhagavatam spoken by this Shukdev Goswami, who has understood this quality of Krishna, what is this quality of Krishna we're talking about? The second one, that is compassion. First is what? Beauty. Second is compassion. So when Shukdev Goswami heard the first verse, Krishna's beauty, said, wow, this person is beautiful. But the second verse nailed it. The second verse says, Aho bakiyam stanakala kutam jigam samapayadapya sadhavi lebe gatindatri uchitam tatonyam kam va dayalum sharanam brajema. Aho bakiyam, Bakasur's sister Baki, stanakala kutam, she put poison in her breast. Jigam samapayadapya sadhavi, she's a sadhavi, she's a demoness. She came with that poison to kill baby Krishna, and by feeding him milk, but actually feeding him poison. But what did Krishna do? He sucked her breast, he took the milk, and he also took the poison. And then he killed her. But Krishna did not simply kill her. Lebe gatim datri uchitam tatonyam. Because she offered milk, because she played the role of a mother, Krishna gave her the position of a nurse in the spiritual world. So the last line says, Kam va dayalum sharanam brajema. Who is more worthy of taking shelter? Who is more dayalu than Krishna? So when Shukdev Goswami heard this verse, he was like, he stopped. He was stunned. How can somebody be so compassionate that somebody is trying to kill you and you give him the position of a mother? And Shukdev Goswami's heart also was filled with compassion. See, we all are attracted by beauty, okay? But we won't be attracted by Krishna simply because Krishna is beautiful. Only when we understand that Krishna is compassionate and Krishna loves us and Krishna is going to forgive us, Krishna is kind to us, only then we will be attracted to Krishna. Beauty plus compassion is what makes Krishna irresistible. Only beauty, we will not be attracted. Why we will not be attracted to Krishna? Only because of beauty. Because we are suffering. So when we are suffering, we want somebody to be kind to us, not simply beautiful. You know, we go to the kitchen, sometimes there are some minor accidents. Like if sometimes when you're cooking, some boiling sabzi or something falls on your hand, it's like, it's burning. So if that time some beautiful young woman comes in front of you, and the cook is not, and she's going to smile at you. The cook is not going to say, wow, you're so nice. He's going to have burning. But if she comes with Bernal, if she has something to give me relief, then I'll say, okay, welcome. Welcome. You're beautiful, that's okay, but you have something to give me relief. So Krishna is beautiful, that's great. And Bhagavatam is filled with the descriptions of Krishna's beauty. But Shukdev Goswami is attracted by Krishna's beauty plus Krishna's compassion. And that's why Shukdev Goswami's heart was filled with compassion. And because his heart was filled with compassion, he spoke, he called a spade a spade. He spoke the truth without flattery. And because he spoke it purely, he transformed the hearts of millions of people over the last 5,000 years. And Srila Prabhupada perfectly embodied this mood of Shukdev Goswami. And wherever he went, he was just carrying compassion. Once when Srila Prabhupada saw some two old men coming out of a dance bar, some dirty kind of thing in Paris, Srila Prabhupada heard what these old men were doing. Immediately tears came in his eyes. He said, they're wasting their life, they're about to die. Why don't they take shelter of Krishna? So whenever Srila Prabhupada would see people suffering, his heart would be overwhelmed with compassion. And therefore, when Sukdev Goswami or his representatives like Srila Prabhupada speak, a devotee who sincerely hears, he also develops compassion. He also develops a desire to get out of this material world. Therefore, the Bhagavatam beginning with prayers to Guru, who is compassion. Generally, out of the class, you see, somebody was telling me, in ISKCON, many Bhagavatam classes, why people sleep in the class. He says, because in the Bhagavatam classes, we sleep because the speaker keeps saying, so. Many times we say, so. So means in Hindi, sleep. So anytime we say, so. So therefore, you will see that Bhagavatam doesn't begin with so. Bhagavatam begins with Om Ajnana Timirandasya. Don't sleep. Wake up. It's time to wake up. Bhagavatam is for shaking us. That's why Guru's words, what the speciality of Bhagavatam is, speciality of Guru is, when those words are spoken, they're not something new. You will see an amazing thing about Krishna consciousness is, if you hear attentively, you will realize that knowledge was already there in you. It is simply getting revived. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunai Shavanadi Shuddha Chitte Koroye Uday. It is dormant in our heart, and when externally a devotee is speaking, it simply revives our dormant consciousness. And that's why devotees, when they hear submissively, they get these aha moments in Krishna consciousness, which is called as realization. So when we hear sincerely, that's when we actually we realize something which we already know. Srila Prabhupada was once walking in California. There was a lake which was filled with ice, and Srila Prabhupada had his walking cane, so he just took it. He just started hitting the ice, and devotees were wondering what is Srila Prabhupada doing. And Srila Prabhupada looked at them and said, "You know what I'm doing right now? I'm breaking this ice because ice is artificial and the natural condition is water. And do you know why I'm doing this? To teach you that this is exactly what I'm doing with you. My instructions, my words are like breaking the thick layer of ice in your heart, because your natural condition is to love Krishna. But it is that water is become artificially ice. Similarly, your love for Krishna is now covered. Therefore, I'm trying to break it." So a guru removes the blindness from our eyes. There are three examples. Bilva Mangal Thakur, he is the greatest, one of the greatest devotees. Surdas, they were externally blind, but internally they could see Krishna always. So we are talking about internal blindness, removing the internal blindness. Externally, some people are blind, but they can still see Krishna. One of my closest friends is Raj Parikshit Prabhu. He's in Borivali. I just love him, and we speak a lot. He was a normal boy till he was in 11th standard, and then he lost both his eyes. So he's blind since the age of 16. But I've not seen a lover of Krishna like him. And the way he has memorized all the 71 verses describing Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, from Bilva Mangal Thakur's Govinda Damodara Madhaveti verses, because I have to chant these verses in all my classes. So he also started liking them, and he memorized all of them. And the way he describes Krishna's beauty, I can clearly see that he's seeing Krishna. Always, although he's externally blind. So some people are externally blind, but they are seeing Krishna. Dhritarashtra was externally blind as well as internally blind. And that's why Vidura comes to him and smashes him. We will read this later on in the first canto, I think 13th chapter we will read. When we come to 13th chapter, how Vidura will, as a guru, he will remove Dhritarashtra's internal blindness. So there are some people who are externally blind, but internally they can see Krishna, like Dhritarashtra, Bilva Mangal Thakur, or Surdas. And there are some who are externally and internally blind, like Dhritarashtra. And there are some who are externally they can see, but they're internally blind, like Duryodhan. So Duryodhan is a classic case. Therefore, we need a guru. We need that attitude of wanting to hear. That's why one of the prayers we chant before the class is Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim. Et Kripa Tamaham Mande Shri Guru Dinakarina. Oh, Gurudev can make the dumb person speak, he can make the lame person climb mountains. So like this, without Guru, our knowledge, what we get from scriptures will simply remain information. But with Guru's mercy, that knowledge can become realization. Otherwise, intellectual gymnastics, word jugglery, that's not going to help us. Srila Prabhupada was never impressed by fluff, all those word, the jargons people use. Oh, spirituality is beauty. Beauty is peace. Peace is love. No, it's simply fluff. It's not, that doesn't carry substance. Once when Srila Prabhupada was giving a class in New York, one man came and said, Swamiji, what you're speaking is all, is knowledge. But I want an experience. That Swamiji there in the other street, he gives me an experience. Srila Prabhupada said, no. Spiritual life means understand the knowledge, second, apply it, and then experience it. Experience Krishna. It's not simply some superficial, mundane goodness. It is deep. Understand this. He said, no, Swamiji. It's all about, that Swamiji there is very good. He gives me, he started saying something very abstract. Srila Prabhupada said, what does he give you? So this man said, no, I get something like it's like an electric current flows through me. Srila Prabhupada said, I can also give you that. He said, really? Srila Prabhupada said, yes, come. He called him close and he said, look at that electric socket, put your finger inside, I'll switch it on, and you will also get an electric current and shock in your body. So Srila Prabhupada dismissed those, so-called esoteric realizations. Like one lady said, Swamiji, when I chant Hare Krishna, wow, oh, Swamiji, I see all this blue light and red light over my head. So Srila Prabhupada said, keep chanting, that will go away. She thought she had got some great realization, but Srila Prabhupada dismissed it as if it was of no consequence. He said, it will go away, don't worry, just keep chanting. Because it's deeper, it's about a relationship with Krishna. And therefore, these first three verses are very important because it has established the mood of taking shelter of Guru. Now, the next two verses we will discuss next time, next Tuesday, where Shukdev Goswami, Suta Goswami is going to thank Goddess Saraswati, the rishis, everyone, and then he's going to glorify the audience. See, this is very important. The speaker not only remembers and thanks Krishna and Guru and Mother Saraswati, Goddess Saraswati, he's also grateful to the audience because they are giving him a chance to glorify Krishna. It's not that he's thinking, oh, I'll come and done a favor to all of you. No, the ideal situation is when the speaker is grateful to the audience and the audience is grateful to the speaker because he is giving them knowledge, and the speaker is grateful to them because they are giving him an opportunity. And an unfortunate situation is when the audience thinks, oh, well, we are paying him money, he better speak. I need value. What? Value for money. And the speaker thinks, oh, these guys are useless. So that's a very, very unfavorable situation. So like this, so this is the mood in which Bhagavatam is studied. So that's why the first 5 verses are important. And after that, the 6th verse onwards, all the 6 questions will be answered by Suta Goswami. But before we go into the answers, I thought it's important to study the mood in which we study Bhagavatam. I request all of you that next class, you can please come reading the first 3 verses purports, and also the 4th and 5th, which we will take up next Tuesday. And then we'll complete the introduction to chapter 2. Thank you very much. I think we have touched 9 p.m., but still we could take one question if there is any. And then we can end for today. Thank you very much, Hare Krishna, for taking part today. Is there any question anybody has? Well, we don't have.
Very good.
Yes, Rasi Govind Prabhu. I just thought you're not there.
I was there. Prabhuji, I want to thank you. Very nice class and a lot of realizations. I mean, you spoke very nicely about the world, the material world, misery, Krishna's nature. He is not only beautiful, but he's compassionate, kind, forgiving, Dayasindhu. And your experiences with your preaching and accepting the things. So actually, you said Gyan, or very nice point. Gyan and Karma se zyada taste bhakti, express your mind and feelings to Krishna. That is more satisfying. So actually, Prabhuji, most of the time in our, like I'm just saying, bhakti, when we approach to Krishna consciousness, we are having that suffering. As you said, we are having rotting, we are having troubled, we face suffering and trouble, so we turn to Krishna. But initial motive is not to, love Krishna or, serve Krishna. It's just like we are suffering and we want some balm and some Bernol so that we can get, and eventually that suffering goes away and we go on with our life. So our motive doesn't change, still we feel that suffering के point of view से approach होता है भी. The motive is not to love and serve Krishna, and just like simply like whether the world is good or bad doesn't matter to us. So how do you understand these things? Because like really, this is seen in many cases also.
So you are saying that initially when we come, we simply want relief from suffering, not to love Krishna. And unfortunately, and you are saying unfortunately we get trapped there. Even as we get older, we only want relief from Krishna. We don't want to serve him unconditionally.
Yeah, I mean like that motive,
They haven't changed.
Troubled. We appreciate when the suffering goes away, we appreciate that. But again, like that love and the motive of love and serving Krishna unconditionally doesn't come. Like because that was
do you think I've understood your question?
Yeah. I mean, you said it correctly that that motive is mainly love to get relief and troubles. It's not.
Have I understood? I will paraphrase your question. Please tell me if I've understood your question or not. You are saying that when we come new in Krishna consciousness, we don't have a motivation to love Krishna. We simply want relief from our suffering. And unfortunately, even after we spend many years, we may appreciate Krishna, but still our motive remains to get relief. And we really don't want to serve Krishna unconditionally and love him unconditionally. That's not as attractive as
that doesn't take
from Krishna.
That doesn't.
Is that right? Is that right?
Yes. That doesn't take place. That's what I'm saying. Correct. You're right.
So the answer to this question is we have no choice. See, initially, Krishna says in the Gita, 4 types of people come to me. Those who are distressed, those who want money, those who are seekers of truth, and those who are want curiosity. Artho, Jigyasu, Artharthi, Jnani. These are the 4 kinds of people who come to me. So Krishna welcomes all of them. But as we spend time in Krishna consciousness, now I'm going to say something very frank. If we don't upgrade our standard in bhakti, then our days are numbered. We will feel lost in Krishna consciousness. Because Krishna consciousness is not about I, it's about Krishna.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, it's like this, I'll give a simple example. Bhaktivedanta Hospital, we have a hospital in Mira Road.
Yeah.
So outside the hospital, there is a juice center.
Okay.
So somebody is very thirsty and he's hungry and he sees this juice center and he says, oh, let me enter this hospital. He's not interested in getting medical checkup. He's just hungry. And he goes to the hospital premises, he goes to the canteen, he sees this juice center, he drinks the juice, he's feeling relieved. And after some time, he wonders, what am I doing here? There's nothing for me here. I came for a juice, I was hungry and I got that. Now what should I do here? Then he leaves the hospital. But somebody else, he also enters, like we are all like people who entered the hospital because we wanted some juice or food. But then we understood, oh, yahan pe medical checkup hota hai, and then we realized we were a big disease. And then we got admitted and we got cured or whatever, we're getting cured. So the point is, ISKCON is like a hospital which is offering much, much more than simply food and juice.
Yeah.
But we have not come for the treatment. We have come for some peripheral benefits.
Yeah.
So therefore, if we don't upgrade and if we don't really aspire to connect with Krishna, then at some point of time we'll feel lost in the movement because Krishna consciousness is not it's not simply fulfilling our superficial needs. Because initially, we wanted relief, we got relief, and then we're wondering, what else? What is there more? There is a lot more if we simply change the paradigm. This is the difference between our process and most of the Semitic religions, like whether you take Judaism, Christianity, Islam, they all talk about God in terms of themselves. God is one who gives me our daily bread. God is somebody who takes care of my need. God is in connection with me. But in ISKCON, in Krishna consciousness, we consider God as independent of me. Whether I exist or not, whether my problems are solved or not, God is enjoying his own life. God is amazing personality. Here we ask questions, what is God doing when he is not busy solving my problems? God also has an existence. God also has his party. God also has his friends. So when we move from the I space to the God space, when we move from my world to Krishna's world, that's when bhakti begins. What we are speaking now is all to, it's like an attract, it's like to pull the person inside, come on, just connect to Krishna. Krishna loves you. But eventually we want to come to a stage where we want to love Krishna unconditionally.
Yeah.
And the experience you will get then is something totally different. I'll give you a simple example. When I went to Mayapur in 2004 or 5, I was chanting in the Prabhupada Samadhi. I'll end with this example. I know we are late, 5-10 minutes late. I'll just end with this. So I was chanting alone, and one old one man came to me and said, it was Ekadashi, and I was chanting extra and I was hungry, and he said, Prabhuji, prasad payenge, prasad. So I said, wow, why not? Somebody is offering me prasad. So I said, yes. And he took me inside and he started feeding me so much Ekadashi prasad. I was wondering, I was cynical, I was wondering, why is he giving me all this? Oh, I thought, he's a Bengali fellow, old man, he wants something. That I'm from Mumbai, he may want my shawl, or he may want some job in Mumbai. Because I was a manager that time in temple, we are cynical. We look at everything, people want something in return. But I kept humoring him. I said, okay, right now I'm famished, let me feed my hunger, and then I'll give him whatever he wants. I'll give him some donation. Yeah. So I ate the prasadam, and then I was surprised. He kept feeding me more and more, and then he insisted on taking my leaf plate. He cleaned the place, and I asked him, do you want something? And finally he said, Prabhuji, ek favor chahiye, ek favor. Then I understood, now he's going to ask his agenda. I said, yes, I thought he'll ask me a lot of money or something. He said, Prabhuji, mere liye pray karo aap. Please, sincerely pray karo. That's okay. What else, He said, nothing else. He only kept saying pray karo. I said, are you sure you don't want anything else? He said, what can you give me? I'm in Mayapur. I'm in shelter of Lord Chaitanya. I don't need anything. I just need your prayers. And that's when I realized this guy wanted nothing from me. He simply wanted to give me. And trust me, there are so many people we meet in our lives. We forget them, But when somebody gives us something without expecting anything in return, we never forget that person. And I remember I have forgotten so many people, and even a hard-hearted person like me, a cynical person like me, my heart was so touched that I went to after that, every year I went to Mayapur, I would go and meet him. I would take, and I that very day when he gave me all that prasadam and he revealed his identity and his motive, I ran to my room, all the cookies I had from the temple, I gave it to him. I just gave him everything I had because I saw that this man wanted nothing from me. He just wanted to serve. So when somebody wants to serve you without actually wanting anything in return, even hard-hearted people like us, we feel so touched. Just imagine the most soft-hearted personality, Krishna, how he will feel when we offer something to Krishna without expecting anything in return.
Wow.
So we have to make at some point of time, we have to make that transition. So why not begin with something small? Why not try once in a week doing something without wanting anything in personally? And once we do that once a week, then we will get a time will come when we'll get addicted to it. We will never want to not do anything. We'll not like it when we do something with an agenda. Because in this world, everywhere there is an agenda. I give something, then I get something material. But with Krishna, when we do like this, Krishna will be so touched. He will say, "Arey, this person is not wanting anything from me." Krishna will give everything to that person.
Yeah. Very grateful.
So therefore, let us upgrade our standards at some point of time. Maybe not right now, but somewhere we have to begin that process.
Thank you very much.
I thank all of you, and we'll meet again next Tuesday. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you very much. All glories to you.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Haribol. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.